Welcome, Autobots and Decepticons. My name is Matthew Flynn, the gladiator of Kaon, and I am joined by Troy Pacelli, also known as Kaon, the Klingon cleric. Hello, Troy.
Hello, how are you doing this morning? Well, this afternoon for you, this morning for me.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm gonna welcome the chat. Hello, Artificer Joni. Glad to have you here early.
Yeah.
Or in my case, late.
Yeah, we were talking, Artificer. You're what? An hour ahead of the UK? Not really sure. But anyway, yep. So today you're going to take me through. I think last time we left off, I had kind of gone through the 80s with you and described my experience with the Transformers, which was pretty much relegated to the toys in the first generation and the cartoons. Did not realize that there was a connection between the Transformers and some toys I had played with nearly a decade earlier, the Micronauts.
Yeah.
And you were sharing about that, and you took me up through that history.
The brand.
And now you're gonna take me up through these awesome movies that everyone loves, right?
I'm sure.
See, I know that much. I know that those movies are steaming pile, but we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Well, since we left off at the late 80s, early 90s, we had kind of already got to the part where the brand was slowly declining and Hasbro was trying basically any trick that they could think of to keep the brand alive.
Yeah, I seem to remember changing these robots that would change into bugs and into dinosaurs and into other animals. It just started to seem kind of weird to me, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, that's I would imagine the part you're referring to is Beast Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although before that, Transformers did turn into all sorts of animals before that. Both prehistoric animals, already still alive animals, mythological animals with the Terracons who all turn into monsters. Because you have Sinitwin turns into a Greek monster. I've completely forgotten the name of what it's called. The leader turns into a two-headed dragon, or two-headed wingless dragon. And the weird thing is that one member called Blot, he turns into, well, I like to think he turns into a troll, but they never actually establish what he turns into. But yeah, but those animals were very like metallic looking animals rather than like actual organic looking animals like in Beast Wars. Because what came after the early 90s when Hasbro had tried everything, they even tried like relaunching the brand as Generation 2, giving it all kinds of 90s colors and all kinds of 90s gimmicks. And they then decided, one last ditch effort is to do something like really out there and just go with just like actual lean into the animals theme. So they started with Beast Wars. And early material for Beast Wars actually first showed it as being a continuation of like Optimus and Megatron's war in like new bodies. And the only comic material we have on that point is one little mini pack-in comic that came with a 2-pack of a bat and a crocodile transformer, and the bat was Optimus Prime in a new body, and the crocodile was Megatron in a new body, or G1 Optimus and Megatron. But that route didn't last, because the animated series that was made by I believe it was Mainframe Entertainment, a Canadian studio, they decided to ignore that and just tell their own story with the Beast Wars toys. And that's where we got the 3 seasons of Beast Wars, which is very highly regarded in terms of like its storytelling amongst Transformers fans. So do you have any experiences with Beast Wars aside from knowing the base idea?
Yeah, the only experience I have in that regard would be like, you know, going into the shops and seeing the toys on the shelf. And honestly, not being too focused on it, my recollection was very much like I don't know, it was just they were always there, but I didn't get the impression they sold all that well. Like they kind of were peg warmers. So I don't really know how popular they were here in the US. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, Artificer Journey makes a good point. Beast Wars did have a different name. For some reason, in Canada, they seem to think that having war in the name of their cartoon would leave a bad impression on children, so they decided to call it Beasties.
Oh, okay.
I don't know who thought that would be a good.
I'm guessing that generally when decisions like that are made, it has less to do with the marketing department for the property and more to do with the local government, you know, pushing some sort of pearl clutching, you know, agenda, like a kind of censorship.
Yeah,
that doesn't make a great deal of sense. It would be even worse if they did something like that with G.I. Joe, right? Because it's like, he's a soldier. It's war. Deal with it.
Yeah. Even though Beast Wars was still in the G1, same continuity as the G1 cartoon, it basically takes place after the end of the G1 cartoon. And the characters in the show are Maximals and Predacons, who are the descendants of Autobots and Decepticons. And they basically traveled back in time from their future and crash land on prehistoric Earth at the same time that the Autobots and Decepticons were there in like stasis lock. Because the G1 cartoon started with the Autobots and Decepticons crash landing on Earth, going into stasis lock, then staying like that until the year 1984, and then they're woken up by the eruption of the volcano. And then obviously they start the Great War, and then the events of the G1 cartoon take place from there.
So in doing this time travel story, does it create a paradox? Is it an alternate timeline, or does it actually fit neatly in that they don't really do anything that alters history?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because a paradox is relevant to the story of Beast Wars. Not at the beginning, though, later on. But early on in Beast Wars, they do kind of have some instances where it kind of seems like it would break continuity, like having an overabundance of raw energon crystals all over the place, a second moon for some reason. But by the end of the first season, that moon is revealed to be a false moon planted there by some mysterious aliens called the Vok. And then then that moon is blown up. And late into the cartoon, most of the energon crystals are gone. So it's a little more similar to prehistoric, or to Earth later on in the G1 cartoon.
Gotcha.
And also the overabundance of raw energon crystals everywhere does kind of lean into the reason why the Maximals and Predacons choose beast modes. It's because their robot modes, when they step out into like the around the raw energon, the ambient radiation overloads their body and causes like an energon overload in them. So they have to adopt Earth-based animal, or more realistic-looking animal modes to screen out the radiation so that they can actually move around outside. And early on, they can only adopt their robot mode in like brief periods. But by late season 2, season 3, most of the energon is gone by that point, so the beast modes aren't quite as necessary, so they can be in robot mode a little longer.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And as for the paradox because of time travel, this is where the overarching plan of Beast Wars Megatron comes into play, because early on he's just sort of scavenging for energon, but then from season 2, or late into season 2, we then are revealed the reason why the Maximal ship and the Predacon ship crash land or traveled through time to begin with. It's because Megatron's ship traveled back in time with the specific purpose of either killing or just gravely wounding Optimus Prime in the past, so that the Decepticons then win the Great War, and then thus the Predacons are the ones ruling Cybertron in the future. And this actually was like a plan set by G1 Megatron, and he inscribed this plan onto the golden disc. And that'll be the same golden disc that's on the Earth satellite that's sent into space. Was it Void? I keep thinking of Voyager 6 from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, but I know that's not the.
There was only Voyager 1 and 2. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was it. Voyager 1 and 2, because it's 2 golden discs that are in the show. Although I have noticed fans have kind of like questioned at what point G1 Megatron got a hold of the discs and inscribed that plan on them. But I keep thinking there's at least quite a number of years in between season 2 of the G1 cartoon and the 96 animated film, because that film takes place in 2005, and then the season 2 takes place in 1985. So there's quite a number of years there where Megatron could have enacted this plan or set out this plan.
Yeah.
Or before obviously being badly injured and then being transformed into Galvatron and everything. And this plan that Beast Wars Megatron enacts, he does mention that he was kind of reluctant to go for this plan. He wanted to try a few other plans before resorting to that one, use that one as like a last resort kind of plan. And it actually
does seem pretty extreme.
Yeah. I could show you the clip of Beast Wars Megatron going to or walking through the arc and then damaging Optimus Prime.
I'm sure.
Although I have a feeling you and me will probably be the only ones who will hear it properly, but the chat won't exactly hear. Because I watched the last Transformers stream, and the video I pulled up, I noticed the audio was very, very quiet and was barely hearable. But I could hear it on my end when I actually brought it up on stream. So I think what I'll do is I'll just link the clip in the chat so that anyone watching can then click on that to watch the clip.
I was just reading the scroll going across the bottom.
Wait, were you just not paying attention to that at all?
I hadn't even noticed it until now. And actually, I caught the last two words. I'm like, wait, what?
Oh, that's ironic. The first thing that happens when I click on the video is an ad for StreamYard plays.
That's funny.
Actually, before I do that.
Oh, okay. So Artificial Joni says he's 2 hours ahead. Okay.
Yeah.
And hey, Trooper, good to see you. Welcome. Glad you could make it too.
That would be the one thing to remember about me is I will never, well, 90% of the time, I won't miss the chance to make a joke.
Yep. Biggest dingus. Uh-huh. And it looks like, oh, there you are. You're back.
I have no idea what.
Yeah, there was a bit of an audio issue there, and I figured you'd work through it, and then you disappeared for a second. I was like, uh-oh, what's going on? Okay, so you dropped the link to the video.
Yeah, so anyone who wants to watch the clip.
Oh, was not expecting that 3D computer animation.
Okay, let's.
It looks like some sort of a Sunday morning religious cartoon or something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's
that's
Optimus Prime, all right. Now, do those big spaceships transform too, if they're not actually crashing?
Okay, there we go. That's the share that one. There we go. Okay. I will point out that this clip is edited, so there are some parts missing.
Uh-huh.
Oh, actually, hold on, let me. Actually, does that even matter if I get rid of that? Oh, like 5 minutes.
Yeah, oh, yeah, actually, says those graphics are very retro. Yeah, I mean, it's like just a step up from that Dire Straits video, Money for Nothing.
Yeah. So obviously this is the season finale, so obviously there's a lot of plot points that we're building up to this.
Right.
Can you hear that as well as I can?
I cannot.
Ah, okay. Okay, and I suppose you have to click click and watch it through the link as well. I do find that kind of annoying that I can't share the audio.
So at the time that this was put out, was this considered to be, good graphics?
Yes, because CGI hadn't quite been used in this, in this way. This is one of the early 3D or 3D CG animated shows.
I mean, because admittedly, given the nature of it, you do get a greater amount of motion and stuff, because the cartoons tended to, the 2D animation tended to limit their movements in order to save on animation. But
Yeah.
I don't know, I felt they did it pretty well, and I thought the graphics were pretty fine for what it was.
Yeah. So for you, he's just moving around randomly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a lot of motion just because we can do motion, not really like thinking through if it makes sense, in the story.
Yeah. Yeah, everything that's being said definitely makes this much better. Very inappropriate joke I could make right now.
I was just thinking, you got one floppy lightsaber there, dude. Yeah, I have to say that for the space shots, these graphics work pretty well.
Yeah.
Trooper FN2525 says, I have a Transformer Prime Cliff Jumper mint in box. Admittedly, the diecast action figures are always better. Yeah, I would agree. The downside, though, is sometimes when it's a plastic piece against those metal pieces,
Yeah.
moving them
I'll
back
pause on that
and they loosen up
for no particular reason. This actually brings up a point.
Mm-hmm.
Later, this is actually the cliffhanger. This whole moment is the cliffhanger for season 2,
Mm-hmm.
and then season 3 is the final part of the story. And obviously they couldn't like outright kill Prime here, because that would make it too impossible for the Maximals to then restore time to normal. So they kind of had to find a middle ground, and apparently having Optimus have a mutilated face was apparently enough to cause a paradox.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking, when they awaken from stasis lock, couldn't they just repair Prime's face and then he can just continue as normal?
Yeah.
Because later on in the episode, or the first episode of season 3, that's exactly what they do. A machine comes out, hovers over Optimus's head, goes around his face and restores his head back to normal. Oh, it was kind of a difficult spot they were in with doing that. Yeah, so that's
Beast
okay.
Wars.
Yes, or that's specifically the cliffhanger of season 2. And yeah, like I said, that scene really is carried a lot more by like the audio, what's being said, and the music playing in the background. Kind of doesn't really feel as like vast and epic if you can only if you can't hear anything, if you can only see them move, the characters moving.
Right.
Oh, and of course, it being out of context with various clips edited out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Transformers Prime is also 3D animated, although because that one came out in 2010, that was obviously the 3D CGI animation was much improved. And I believe it was done by a Japanese studio rather than a Canadian one. So yeah, so Beast Wars obviously came out in the mid to late 90s, but in between Beast Wars, the Japanese company Takara released two 2D animated Beast Wars shows to kind of fill in the gaps between the seasons of Beast Wars. That's Beast Wars Second and Beast Wars Neo. And then I suppose you could also include car robots, although that's a little more vague whether that is in the G1 continuity or not. Obviously, in America, it had no relation to G1. It was its own separate show. And I don't recall watching all of Robots in Disguise or 2001 Robots in Disguise. But I did watch most of the early part of that show. I did really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Back to that.
So how do fans kind of reconcile, how do I want to say this? When you have different storylines because they were told by different, animation studios that made their own, artistic decisions and whatnot, how do the fans kind of reconcile that?
Well, most fans would, if they like the respective thing, like not all G1 fans like Beast Wars, but most fans do. You sort of, I suppose it's kind of similar to how you'd view like Star Trek, even though that looks, well, obviously it's live action all the way through, but like there's a different visual style to it. We kind of view it somewhat similar to that, where it's like, where it looks different, but we still recognize it as being in the same continuity.
Sure.
Obviously, if it actually is meant to be in the same continuity, like with Beast Wars and its relation to G1.
Gotcha.
Although, when it comes to the Japanese shows, we tend to either like pick and choose bits of the Japanese continuity, and then we like recognize bits and pieces as being what probably happened in the G1 continuity, or we'll just leave them separate from each other. Kind of like our own headcanon.
Gotcha.
Because there was definitely a point in the G1 continuity where the Japanese shows like very noticeably split off from the American shows, or the American show and the American stories.
And is that where we kind of start getting into the the alternate universes and the graphics that we were looking at last time.
Yes, the outdated flow charts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although that was mostly true for Transformers very early on, not just later. Well, it became more apparent later on, but it was still present very early on. And Beast Wars had a follow-up show called Beast Machines, which is not as well regarded as Beast Wars, despite having a much better visual look to it. Although I will go into some of the problems with Beast Machines. Although Beast Machines is kind of a pros and cons rather than just a straight con.
Sure.
Because obviously it looks better. The story it being told is definitely darker than Beast. Probably not quite the darkest Transformer show, but it's definitely going for a darker tone. Because basically Beast Wars has the Maximals and Predacons. After the end of Beast Wars, they then return back to Cybertron in their own time period. And Beast Wars Megatron gets loose from the shuttle that they're taking because they strapped him to the roof of the shuttle. I'm not quite sure why they chose that route of taking a prisoner back, but no, I'm not going to judge alien robots for their method of removing prisoners.
Yeah.
But essentially, Megatron gets loose and falls into the it's not quite a wormhole, kind of a time vortex, and he ends up back on the future Cybertron earlier than the Maximals and Predacons do, and he then is able to take over the planet, convert everyone to mindless drones, or remove their sparks and convert them to mindless drones, and then start hunting the Maximals from the Beast Wars after they land. And basically, kind of the story progresses as a nature versus technology kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Although behind the scenes interviews with the writers of Beast Machines, they actually specifically said they didn't want to go with like a blunt nature good, technology bad. They wanted to have it be a more nuanced, balanced perspective. So it's like Optimus Primal kind of ends up becoming very like a religious zealot for converting Cybertron to a natural planet or a nature planet.
Interesting.
Because he believes that Vector Sigma, which in this future has evolved into a non-corporeal mirror thing that's kind of a mirror-looking thing called the Oracle, which has the power to like retrofit the Maximals into techno-organic being, like more techno-organic than pure beast or pure robot, because somewhere in the middle. And Vector Sigma tasks Optimus Primal with basically restoring Cybertron into kind of a techno-organic planet rather than a mechanical planet. And Optimus Primal kind of misinterprets this into meaning that he is supposed to turn Cybertron into a purely organic planet. And on the opposing side, you have Megatron, who now dislikes his beast mode and wants to get rid of it, and is kind of turning himself into some kind of animal, mechanical Frankenstein-looking thing in an attempt to get rid of his beast mode and make himself more robotic.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going more for the turning Cybertron into a more mechanical or soulless and mechanical world. And the whole point of the show is that both of those two are like, no, one of them not one of them is better than the other, because they're two extremes of those two ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And that the actual thing that Vector Sigma wants to do is somewhere more of a balanced approach. And obviously Optimus Primal, he does like learn that by the end of the show, he like realizes that he was being like too zealous in his like role.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Very, very similar to older Star Trek in a way. When it's in the way that older Star Trek would tell their stories.
Interesting.
Yeah. But despite all of these things, or these like interesting, I think, ideas and things that Beast Wars was going for, there is a reason that most fans kind of end up thinking less of Beast Machines than Beast Wars, and that's because a few strange decisions that kind of undermine the overall idea.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, during the episodes, they would have a continuous techno beat playing basically all the time through basically most of the episodes. So as you're watching it, you're just hearing the same repetitive techno beat over and over again.
Yeah.
And it gets kind of grades on your ears after a while. It makes the show very difficult to watch. And also, characters tend to act, well, in some ways the characters do act kind of unnaturally different from their Beast Wars interpretation.
Sure.
Because I don't think the writers quite did their best at kind of having the characters feel more like they've progressed from their Beast Wars characterization into how they are depicted in Beast Machines. Instead, it feels more like the characters have been suddenly changed. And you also have a couple of former good characters who have been converted into villains for Beast Machines, although they are redeemed by the end of the show. And the one that kind of bugs me is the very honorable and chivalrous Silverbolt is converted to a villain, and then when he's redeemed at the end of the show, he's then a standard brooding 90s anti-hero, which I don't appreciate that change.
Understood.
I do know that Beast Wars itself, it didn't necessarily make fun of or make a joke out of Silverbolt's like very like old school heroic personality. It does definitely kind of play off somewhat like a joke, but kind of in a sense of like as if he's like in on the joke, kind of.
Yeah.
I suppose like earnestly being the way he is, but while also still kind of being played, not taken too seriously as well. Because there are moments in the original Beast Wars where Silverbolt kind of acted very heroic, and then another character would make fun of him, although it's kind of in character for the other, because the other character would be Rat Trap,
Mm-hmm.
who is characterized as being very like cynical and making fun of people and also getting on people's nerves, sometimes very quickly and sometimes after a while. So it kind of makes sense that someone like Rat Trap would make fun of Silverbolt for the way he acts. So it's kind of, so it feels less like the show itself is making fun of Silverbolt being like a old school hero, and more of him acting naturally and then someone like Rat Trap making fun of him because it's in character for him to do that.
So almost like a meta reference. It's kind of self-aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Because there's one of the like primary storylines for Civil War in Beast Wars is him trying to turn the female Predacon Black Arachnia, trying to like turn her to the side of good and convert her back into a Maximal. Because she started as a Maximal protoform, but was activated as a Predacon, and then she kind of remained a villain for the early part of the show, and she kind of then converted to a Maximal. I mean, I like to think of Silverbolt and Black Arachnia as kind of a Batman Catwoman kind of relationship. That's probably the best way I can describe those two characters when they interact with each other.
Yeah. Artificer Joni is referencing a quote. I think he's talking about the series you're talking about right now. It's a quote I vaguely remember. "Tell my story, tell it truly. The good with the bad."
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I know what that's a quote of. That's the character of Dinobot in Beast Wars. He was basically an honorable warrior. He was kind of conflicted because he started out as a Predacon. He wanted to lead them, and then Megatron basically stopped him from doing that. So he decided to go to the Maximals and claim leadership over them instead. He then lost. He then did a one-on-one duel with Optimus Primal for leadership. He then lost, and Optimus spared him, so he decided to swear himself to the Maximals, even though he couldn't be leader, and he kind of had an arc of progressing from a villain into being more heroic. And by the early part of season 2 of Beast Wars, he then had an episode. There was an episode called Code of Hero, where basically Dinobot kind of had to grapple with the whole idea of with destiny, and can he change his future, and he kind of had to grapple with the whole idea of that he might actually that he would either die a hero or remain a bad guy. And he actually came off a lot like a samurai now I think about it. And basically in that episode, Megatron was using the golden disc because there was on the inscription on the golden disc, it had the this thing where you could see, where it showed you the future of wherever you were standing. It would show you the future of what you're looking at. And so Megatron looked at a mountain and then looked at the golden disc, and it showed that same mountain. And then he commanded one of his soldiers to blow up the mountain. And then when he looked at the disc, it then changed to then show the mountain blown up, because the golden disc was showing the future and they're in the past. So he kind of realized that the golden disc allowed him to have some degree of control over time, or at least over the way things progressed. And he found a small village of humans that would then progress into civilization on Earth as we know it. Sure. So he decided to attack this village to try and wipe out humans before we ever fully develop on this planet. And Dinobot basically oh, hold on a minute. I'll be right back.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to turn to the chat. Trooper and Artificer, you guys are here. The era of Transformers that Matthew's talking about now, were you fans at the time? Is this an era that you followed along with? Obviously, Artificer Joni, you did watch it, to know that quote. You kind of know what we're talking about here. As I said at the top of the show, I had never seen any of these cartoons. So, Trooper, you didn't jump in till Prime, and you caught some of the older tunes. I mean, I'm guessing you guys are definitely bigger fans than myself, so you might even be more inclined to, delve into these things, now in the retrospect, get caught up if you're so inclined. Yeah. Yep. I mean, I'm amazed by what you can actually find on YouTube. I mean, sometimes you'll find, at least for more obscure series, you'll find the whole series just out there on YouTube and nobody cares because, it's some hard to find, not anybody paying attention kind of thing. There's a series that Boomer and I will be talking about tonight, and he sends me a link, and there's a whole series. I can't remember if Beast War actually aired in Finland. I know most of the Beast Wars era stuff from research and clips. See, yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about, being able to get caught up, after the fact.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, I was just talking with the chat a little bit. They were sharing their experience with this era, and Artificer Joni was saying that he doesn't remember it actually being aired in Finland, but he's kind of caught up, through clips and research and whatnot. And
yeah, you can.
Trooper,
Yeah, you can buy not clips. You can buy collections of the G1 cartoon, Beast Wars, Beast Machines. Actually, most Transformers cartoons you can buy collections of off Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Except the Japanese Beast Wars shows, for whatever reason, you can't get hold of a physical copy of them. And they don't have an English translation either.
That's rough.
Yeah. Where was I before I pulled a Professor Geek? I believe it was... Oh yeah, I was talking about Dinobot, his final episode. Yeah, he after Megatron's attacking a village that's basically the seed of humanity, I suppose you could call it.
Sure.
And he starts attacking it with all his other Predacons as well. And Dinobot's the last one, or the only Maximal there. And all the other Maximals, they're not going to get there in time to be able to properly give him some backup and actually drive away the Predacons. So Dinobot decides, after a little bit of introspection, he decides to jump down and start fighting off all of the Predacons at once. And he gets down there, breaks both of the golden discs that Megatron has, and successfully drives off all of the other Predacons, but is too badly damaged, so he ends up dying. And it's just as the other Maximals get there that he is then lying on the floor dying, and he says to the other Maximals this clip that Artificer Joni has put in the chat here.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I just realized I can just do this. Where is it? Yeah, this one. Mm-hmm. And Dinobot essentially says this to the other Maximals after they arrive as he's dying.
There is an honor to that, The good and the bad.
Yeah.
You know, don't sugarcoat it.
Yeah. Dynamite will definitely be the most Klingon of the Maximals.
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, now that I've told the story of that quote, what else was there? Oh yeah, after Beast Machines, Hasbro decided instead of making their own cartoon, they would instead import one of the Japanese anime or Transformers anime and dub that into English and bring that over. And so they chose the Japanese show Car Robots, which in Japan was kind of vague if that actually is in the G1 continuity or if it's obviously later on it was later established that actually is in the Generation 1 continuity. And it kind of acts as the third Japanese Beast Wars anime because that show involves Autobots and Predacons, and then later some of the Predacons are replaced by Decepticons.
Yeah.
And also the Robots in Disguise toy line was made up of all different toys, like a few Beast Wars toys that were repainted, a few G1 toys and G2 toys that were repainted and renamed. Yeah, so and that only lasted about 2 seasons. And then after that, Hasbro decided to actually partner with Takara to actually develop a more substantial show. And this is where we come to the Unicron trilogy, which is comprised of Transformers Armada, Energon, and Cybertron. And this was in the early 2000s, which is, I believe, where we had like probably an earlier example of like an 80s nostalgia boom.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I'm pretty sure a few years ago we also had like a mini 80s nostalgia boom as well. But yeah, this was probably the first example of that. Because obviously at the same time as the Unicron trilogy, we also had the Transformers Dreamwave comics were also going. And they were basically making their own G1 continuity, making their own Transformers Armada comics, and then their own Transformers. I think some of Energon they also made a comic for, but sadly Dreamwave went out of business, so any and all stories that they made basically went unfinished. Yeah. Although Dreamwave did actually introduce a few parts of the Transformers, like mythos, I suppose you would call it.
Mm-hmm.
You have some details that would become reoccurring elements later on. Like, for instance, the main villain of a big budget Transformers movie, that being the Fallen from the second film. And if I'll bring up a picture. I suppose I don't need to bring up a picture of the Revenge of the Fallen version of the character. I'm sure everyone remembers what he looks like. Or is that a case where you're happy you don't know what he looks like?
I know nothing when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there was actually a connection between the movies and what had gone before.
Yeah. I mean, in the Transformers movie, obviously it's a separate continuity, but they do pull from older shows and comics, which is strange to me because Michael Bay continuously keeps saying that he doesn't want to pull from the G1 cartoon or have any similarity, but yet he blatantly pulls from the G1 cartoon and has similarities to it.
I wonder if it's so much him or the people working for him, writers,
like the writers and the
looking for
artists.
ideas and stuff. Yeah.
I see.
And I would say, not speaking specifically to Transformers, but really all the franchises that tend to do that, you tend to have the fandom on the one hand going, well, at least they're drawing from the source material, and the others will be like, well, they're ripping off the source material and bastardizing it.
Yeah. Okay. Now the Fallen himself, while he did appear in the Dreamwave comics in the early 2000s, this was actually where the character was first introduced. His origin and his whole role in the Transformers universe has slightly altered over time, just like his physical appearance has also altered over time. Okay, share screen. That one. Yeah. So this is the Fallen. This one right here. That's how he first appeared. I definitely prefer this design of the Fallen.
Yeah.
Over that.
Yeah.
Now the Fallen is one of the 13 primes, or the 13 original primes that were created by Primus back in the near the beginning of time when he was fighting Unicron. Because he basically created the 13 primes to help him defeat Unicron, kind of gave him an edge. And each of the primes, like, they presided over a specific, like, fundamental force of the universe. Like, you had Solus Prime, who was the blacksmith of the primes. You had Primer, who was their leader. Alpha Trion, who was, I suppose you could call him their cleric. And then you have the Fallen, who presided over chaos and entropy, although obviously not to a violent degree, or not to a degree where it makes him evil, but rather where he's kind of a counterbalance to the more positive aspects of the universe. And because of this connection, because of this, what he presided over, this resulted in him kind of at some point getting or falling into contact with Unicron, being corrupted by Unicron, and then becoming basically his herald. And basically he then becomes evil, kills one of the other primes, Solus Prime, and then for his betrayal, his name was then removed from history, and he was only referred to as the Fallen. Because before that, his name was Megatronus. Obviously, minor details have changed, like in newer versions of the story. Megatronus, well, he still kills Solus Prime, but for slightly different reasons. Instead of being corrupted by Unicron, he instead is manipulated by fellow Prime Liege Maximo, who is kind of a deceitful liar. Although that addition to the lore I'm not too fond of. I kind of prefer it where the Fallen is corrupted by Unicron. And then you get even more changes when you get into like the IDW comics. You get interference from Shockwave, who's traveled back in time to orchestrate events in a specific way. But that's only in the IDW comics. That's the first toy of the Fallen, obviously based on his Dreamwave design. And this is a third-party toy based on his Dreamwave design, with the additional flames on the figure. Oh, here's this is the comic that introduced the Fallen. Yeah, because it's the War Within the Dark Ages, which is written by Simon Furman, who is a prominent British writer in Transformers. He has actually written quite a lot in Transformers fiction. Yeah, I would definitely call Simon Furman one of the most important writers in Transformers fiction, because he wrote the latter halves of the G1 comic. He wrote the entirety of the G2 comic. He also wrote a whole bunch of Transformers comics for Dreamwave, all different ones, and also he wrote some issues for IDW, and I believe he's still writing Transformers comics today. I don't know if he's stopped or not. But yeah, obviously he started in the Marvel UK Transformers comics back in the 80s. And actually, he's the one who wrote some of the most popular characters in Transformers, like Grimlock, Galvatron, Thunderwing, Bludgeon, and what else was there? Oh yeah, and of course the after Dreamwave went out of business, we then went into IDW Transformers comics in 2005, and they actually had the longest running continuity for Transformers, because their comics were going from 2005 to until they ended their continuity in 2019. Obviously, they still have the license now. They just started a rebooted continuity. What else? Oh, I'm not sure about that, obviously, Joni. I'll have to look up if Simon Furman wrote the scripts for Transformers Animated. Yeah, although that does bring me to anime, because obviously in 2007 we had the first live action film, and then after that they gave us Transformers Animated, and that lasted for a few years. I believe it was 3 seasons, and then after that they then gave us Transformers Prime. Although there is one story I would like to circle back to the 80s comics. I feel like you would, I don't know if you would like this, but you would definitely find this amusing. Back in the 80s, when the 1986 characters were introduced in the movie, and we have characters like RC. When she was introduced in the Marvel comic, specifically the UK comic, she had a very, I suppose, interesting origin, possibly even relevant for our current time. Although now I think about it, at the time the comic did take place in the early 2000s, so it's possibly not as a stretch as we first thought. But basically, Optimus Prime constructed RC because a mob of feminists were angry with him that there weren't any female Autobots present. So he constructed a female Autobot, that being RC, and presented it to them to appease them and go, look, see, we have a female Autobot. And the only thing they can say is they started complaining that the only female Autobot is pink. And then they just started raging about that instead. And Optimus is like just confused by the way us humans act. And I just find that very amusing.
Yeah.
I don't know if feminists acted like that in the 80s, but considering the story doesn't take place in the 80s, it takes place in like 2005, 2006, or at least close to that time.
I mean, there's always been that streak within feminism, you know, but it tended to be seen as more the fringe, you know. The concept of feminism during the second wave of feminism, you know, the 70s and 80s and whatnot, most people tended to take very seriously, you know. I mean, this idea of treating people equal, irrespective of their gender and so forth. I mean, it's pretty common sense kind of things. These are very reasonable things. So when people would push the boundaries and get all bent out of shape about something being pink, you know, for girls, people would just roll their eyes and go, you know, there's more serious things to consider. And I think that's probably what this was coming out of, you know. But yeah, because of the way things have gone in the third and fourth wave feminism, these things that were jokes, you know, and kind of tongue in cheek in the past have become the reality, very much fulfilling Poe's law, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. What else was? Yeah, and so cycling back to not quite the present, but closer to the present, we then have obviously Transformers Prime. That also lasted 3 seasons, and that show even had a made-for-TV movie as like its finale. And then obviously during these 2 shows, obviously we were getting the live action movies. So there are actually multiple things about the movies, or multiple minor notes. Like in the first live action movie, they initially didn't want to use the Matrix of Leadership because they were concerned about association with the Matrix movies that had come out not too long ago, or by that point. So instead of including the Matrix in the movie, they then replaced its like overall purpose in the story with the Allspark. And I mean, the Allspark didn't properly exist in any continuity quite yet. It more of was kind of an idea that had a few different variations between continuities in like the 90s, specifically during Beast Wars. And it wasn't until the 2007 live action movie that we then got a physical form for the Allspark and something a little more concrete as like more than just an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Although weirdly enough, they do in the movie, I believe it was Ratchet. Yeah, I think it was Ratchet. I know it was the green Transformer. That's probably not too clear now I think about it with the Michael Bay designs. But yeah, he refers to the Allspark as raw power, which maybe could be some way of explaining that, but I feel like having it be a physical object kind of goes against the idea of it being raw power. Although later versions of the Allspark kind of did rectify that a little bit, because in Transformers Prime they did introduce the Allspark, but instead of it being like a cube, Instead, it's like actual energy that's contained within a metal container. So it's not, so the Allspark itself isn't an actual physical object, but the container actually is an object that, like, I suppose, contains the Allspark's energy. I feel like that kind of goes better in line with the Allspark being raw power, because it's like an actual non-physical object.
Mm-hmm.
And then what else is it? Let's take a look at some of these comments. Ah, yes, that's yeah, this one. Yeah, that one. This is a good point, because there were actually plans for a 4th season of Transformers Animated, but they ended up not happening because I believe it was the toys. By that point, the toys weren't quite selling as well, I believe, was a reason for that. Or maybe it was the ratings for the show weren't quite as high as when they started. There's a number of reasons why. It's kind of a running theme with Transformers shows where they only run for 3 seasons. Either by the show not doing as well, so it ends up having to be cut off before it can go any further, or because Hasbro intentionally designs it to have 3 seasons only. There's a number of reasons for that. But there are actually some of the ideas that were planned for the 4th season of Animated that I actually would have really liked to see, and that's they had the intention of having an episode be centered around the Shattered Glass universe, and basically have an animated version of Shattered Glass, where the main character, Sari Sundak, was transported into the Shattered Glass universe and interacted with the heroic Decepticons of that universe to help them defeat the evil Autobots there. That's kind of the standard sci-fi plot. Well, I suppose by now it's the standard sci-fi plot. Yeah, I mean that is one thing with Transformers Animated. It does tend, or at the time it was overlooked, it was overlooked early on because it had a different art style, and most of the complaints directed towards that show was because of the way the show looks. And it wasn't until the show actually came out that it actually proved itself. Well, after a couple episodes, it then had proved itself to fans. Then fans actually started to warm up to the show, which, weirdly enough, is a very consistent pattern when it comes to kids animated shows. Is they all have most of the fans complain about the way a specific show looks, and then when the show actually comes out, then they'll kind of watch it and then make their judgment on it. It's definitely a strange existence for kids shows nowadays.
I mean, with such a complicated history too, I think a new viewer might be a little intimidated trying to imagine where to, jump in at.
Well, with that, I would respond the same way that I would respond to starting to read superhero comics, and that would be just pick one and start reading, because after you've actually started reading something from a specific company, you can then kind of get an idea of where to go from there.
Yeah, I remember back in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, I started getting into comics. I literally just started reading whatever was, on the newsstand at the time. And if I found it interesting, I'd at least go and get back issues to get the current story arc. And then every time I'd go in, I'd get the newest one of that title and then maybe a few before that. And I just kind of work my way forward and backward, in the same line.
Yeah. And with Transformers, the benefit of that is because each of the different shows, well, for the most part, all take place in their own separate continuity. That means you can, for the most part, just pick any of the random shows and just watch that all the way through. Because there's the only real instance of where you would have to watch one specific show then go on to another one would be G1 to Beast Wars and then to Beast Machines. Obviously that's if you're going with the American continuity, and then obviously the G1 cartoon, then to the G1 Japanese shows if you want to go with the Japanese continuity. And then any other options would be the Unicorn trilogy, so Armada, Energon, Cybertron, and we go through those three. And then any of the only other instance of going from one specific show or form of entertainment to another would be going through the live action movies. Obviously start with the first movie, then go second, third, fourth, fifth. Although the Bumblebee movie, I do tend to I prefer to view that as a reboot rather than a prequel, because there really is enough deviation in that movie to like justify it being a reboot rather than a prequel. Because it feels more like the end of the movie where Bumblebee takes on the same like 70s vehicle mode that he had in this 2007 movie. It kind of doesn't feel like they've actually worked up to, like, actually placed it before those movies, and more as if they've just made their own story, and then the studio's gone, okay, connect it to the Bay, have this very minor connection to the Bay movies. Because by the end of the movie, Bumblebee's the only one, or the only character in the movie who then adopts his vehicle mode that's the same as the Bay films. Because by the end of that film, Prime has an Earth mode that looks basically identical to his G1 vehicle mode, which is not the same vehicle as the Bay movie version. And Bumblebee and Optimus Prime are the only Autobots that are on Earth by the end of the film, which in itself, I'm pretty sure already contradicts the Bay films, because Bumblebee was on Earth first, and then in 2007, the rest of the Autobots arrived. Although the Bay movies do kind of mix and confuse the continuity very quickly. Actually, how many of the Bay movies have you watched?
Me? I honestly have not watched any of them. I haven't. I could not bring myself to. I mean, again, there wasn't this huge draw for me as a fan of Transformers, but neither there's just enough understanding of Transformers to say that looks like it has nothing to do with anything I know of Transformers.
Yeah. For me,
in fact, even though I know that, some of the Transformer stories have taken place on modern Earth with humans, it just struck me as too much like the He-Man movie, where they throw it, onto modern day Earth just because that makes it cheaper to film, you know? I mean, that's kind of how I saw it.
Yeah. There's actually the Transformers Prime cartoon is actually it's not in it's a separate continuity from the Bay movies, but it does kind of have that kind of Bay movie feel, except better, because it has the same design, or somewhat the same designs as the Bay films, except they're more smoothed out and simplified a little more.
Sure.
And also the Prime show actually does treat the Transformers like characters and the central protagonists of the story.
Artificer Joni says Bayformers. I've seen 1 and 2, 4 and 5, and Bumblebee if you count it as Bay.
I would say Bumblebee has like so little connections to the Bay films, you may as well just not bother counting it as one of them.
Is
And
it
also
worth watching?
Yes, it is. It wasn't directed by Michael Bay. It was directed by someone else, Travis Knight, who has said multiple times in interviews that he grew up watching the G1 cartoon.
Ah, I see.
And after, because I've watched pretty much the entirety of the G1 cartoon, and when I watched the Bumblebee movie, that love and passion for the G1 cartoon definitely shines through in Bumblebee. Especially since this is probably the only live action movie where Optimus Prime is actually characterized as he's supposed to be. Because in the Bay movies, for whatever reason, there are moments where they're attempting to portray him as like an aspirational hero and how he's supposed to be portrayed, but they don't go full in on that idea. They kind of half-ass it and just resort to Prime just straight up murdering Decepticons when he's fighting them, and also in quite brutal fashion as well. Like there's a few different fight scenes in those movies that I vividly remember because of how brutal they were and how out of character Prime was. Because there's one part when he's fighting one of the Constructicons. Actually, I mean the Bay designs are so like messy and like all over the place that it's difficult to properly recall which character is which. But I do recall it is one of the Constructicons that he's fighting, and he basically hides behind a pillar and then quickly spins out, chops off the Constructicon's arm, then gets him in a headlock and stabs him in the face, and then that decapitates that Decepticon for some reason. I'm not sure why. And Optimus he's not even like phased by it. He doesn't even have any problem with doing that. He just does it and then continues with the rest of the plot of the film. Although that does present an issue that the movie never addresses, because the Constructicons in G1 could combined into Devastator, and Devastator is in the second movie, except one of the members is killed in the first movie, but for some reason the movies don't address the fact that one of the members has been killed, and they form Devastator no problem anyway in the second film. So it's like they didn't even bother to look up which characters are which. I think they just threw a name on one of the characters and then just left it at that. And there's also a fight scene, I think it's the second film. Yeah, here it is, where Optimus is fighting this helicopter transformer, or this large helicopter transformer, and he jumps on his shoulders and has these like hook blades in his arms, and he hooks them either side of the Decepticon's face and basically uses those hooks to tear the Decepticon's face in half.
Mm.
And it's about as brutal as that sounds.
Yeah.
And also there's also in the third movie when Optimus, like right at the end of the film, when they're like having like their final battle between Optimus and Megatron, and it's like, I don't want you to pour Dragon Ball Z and have it last like have this fight last hours, but at the same time, I would prefer it if you had the fight be a little more satisfying and at least last more than just about a minute. I think it lasted, because Optimus he's damaged, he's missing an arm. Megatron is relatively uninjured and is basically in the more advantageous position, and Optimus takes this opportunity to grab an Energon axe from the floor, throw it into Megatron's chest while he's distracted, then go up to him, pull the Energon axe out of him, then go behind him, and then shove the axe into his head, and then use that to decapitate him. And all of that happened within a minute. And there's even like slow motion as Optimus is slowly decapitating Megatron. It's like one Optimus wouldn't just straight up murder Megatron with no hesitation whatsoever, and he wouldn't do it as brutally, and he wouldn't mimic Scorpion, or is it Sub-Zero? I forget which one of the ninjas pulls the character's head off and their spine.
Yeah, I don't remember either. Probably Scorpion.
Yeah, basically Optimus wouldn't pull a Scorpion. He wouldn't do it so remorselessly either. And also, a fight between Optimus and Megatron tends to be more interesting when the two are equally, or when they have an equal footing in the fight. Because every other time when we have Optimus and Megatron fighting each other, they're on equal footing, or neither one can get an advantage over the other for very long. Because as soon as one of them gets an advantage in the fight, either like a third party character will come in and interrupt the fight, or some third party element will distract or interrupt the fight in some way and prevent the character who has the advantage from winning. So it kind of keeps them equal. And the Michael Bay's films forgot one of the most important parts of Transformers, like the whole reason the Autobots and Decepticons are fighting to begin with, and that's because they're fighting over Energon, and the Decepticons want to forcibly take Energon, or take Earth's resources and convert that into Energon, and the Autobots want to find peaceful ways of collecting Energon from Earth's resources. And obviously the Autobots come in and fight off the Decepticons and to prevent them from harming the Earth in their attempt to get Energon. And that whole element of the conflict is just completely not present in the Bay films. In fact, I'm pretty sure the Bay film Transformers, I'm pretty sure they shouldn't even be functioning in some of the later films. Because in the first film, they established that the Allspark is where Energon comes from, and that they require the Allspark to get more Energon in order to power their bodies and power their weapons and everything. And then in the second film, they establish the machine under the pyramid that converts a star into Energon, and that machine is destroyed. That's two methods of creating Energon that are now gone, and they haven't established any alternative way of getting energon. So I'm pretty sure by the third movie, most Autobots and Decepticons should have just starved to death or gone into stasis lock because of lack of energon. It just very clearly shows the I don't know if it's ineptitude at storytelling of the writers for the Bay films. I'm sure there's another word that could also be used to describe them. Although I regrettably have watched the fifth movie, and I'll save you the trouble. It's not even worth watching.
I notice Artificer Joni says when seeing alignment charts for Optimus Prime, the Bayformers one is the chaotic evil one. That is enough of a reason for me to never see these movies.
Yeah. I mean, the fifth movie, it starts out like on the same level of quality as the previous four movies, and then as it progresses, it slowly becomes more and more ridiculous before you're in like the final part of the movie. You're then at another alien planet in Earth's atmosphere with pieces of the planet hovering above the Earth, and characters skydiving through like large chunks of debris of an alien planet. And you're like, by the end of the movie, the ridiculousness is so high that at that point your brain's just like, okay, no, whatever, do whatever you want. They even have this one decision in the Bay movies that I don't fully understand, where they decided to get rid of Bumblebee's ability to speak and just have him speak through the radio. And I believe their reasoning in the first film was that they couldn't figure out how to characterize him, so they decided, let's just not have him speak and we can characterize him like that. But by the end of
it's an interesting thought, but it only works because you have this conceit of communicating with humans, and it's like,
yeah.
Again, I don't really think that should be a big part of the story. I think they focus too much on that aspect.
Yeah, and by the end of the first film, they even establish that Bumblebee's voice box is perfectly fine, and he can speak whenever he wants, but he just doesn't for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that if you're going to bother doing that, you should have a good reason that you communicate to the audience.
Yeah. I mean, I even distinctly remember early on in the film where they actually address the fact that he's not speaking, and they even say, oh, his voice box was damaged in battle, but it's working fine now. And even then he still doesn't speak until like the very end, and only says a few words.
I mean, I suppose from a dramatic standpoint, you could take it as, because this is how he first started communicating with these humans, as a matter of continuity, he continues that even though he now has another option,
I definitely would have rewritten this as he literally can't speak throughout most of the film because of like a damaged voice box, and then have the human who he's been around for most of the movie helps him repair his voice box, and then actually successfully repairs it by the end of the film, so that he's then able to speak. Then it would have at least justified him not saying a thing until just like the very end of the movie.
Right. Yeah, that's, again, we
And
talk about this in so many other things. It's just a skill of storycraft that so many modern film writers don't seem capable of. Now, in fairness, I never know how many times somebody has written, a good story and then key elements are edited out by some goofy editor, or mandates from the studio, you must make it shorter, and important story elements are lost. Sometimes you never know that until the DVD comes out with the extra footage.
Yeah.
But
I am, I was going to say, having the whole Bumblebee's like voice box be repaired by the human that he's been with for most of the movie, by the end, it kind of emphasizes his connection with the specific human.
yeah.
I'm also looking up who it is that actually wrote this movie, or the Bay movies. I believe I don't think it's the same writer for all of them, but who's the Fallen? Okay, this this is either going to surprise you or you won't be surprised at all by this. The co-writer for the first film is Alex Kurtzman.
That does not surprise me in the slightest.
And his name is not on any of the sequels. It's somebody else.
I think the only thing that could, make this any worse would be if J.J. Abrams had produced it,
Yeah.
But so there you go. So now what I'm basically taking away from this morning is, if I ever want to get back into Transformers, do not start with the Michael Bay films. Although I could check out the Bumblebee film just for fun.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's fair. That is absolutely fair. I love Artificer Joni here. And why did they give Hot Rod a French accent? See, that's the other problem that I have.
Yeah.
If you have a bunch of aliens, that's what these are, aliens. Okay,
yeah.
they're an artificial life form, but alien nonetheless. They do not speak English. They affect English to communicate with humans, and we hear them in English because we need to understand their communication. But if you're going to give them accents, that accent should portray something. That should tell you this particular individual is somehow foreign to the other robots, that he's associating with. And in a way that conveys how that relationship of foreignness is to them. A French accent would have a very different connotation from a Russian accent, for example. And if you decided to make a Decepticon who became an Autobot, maybe giving them a Russian accent might make some sense, but if there's no reason for it, then what are you guys thinking?
I mean, it makes even less sense for Hot Rod to have a French accent, because he's supposed to be the young, carefree 80s teenager like type of character.
And if that's what you're trying to convey, that there should be a voice and accent that implies that. Maybe he uses some 80s teen slang or something like that, but very much American.
Yeah. And also, for some reason in the film, they had Hot Rod. I mean, the choice of car that he turns into, I could definitely see as Hot Rod.
Mm-hmm.
Although, personally, I prefer Hot Rod to have like a futuristic 80s car. The kind of 80s vehicles that you only see in 80s fiction.
Like a DeLorean.
Yeah, like the kind of thing that you would only see in like an 80s movie, what they thought the future looked like. It's like that kind of vehicle. And I think you would call it retro future or retro 80s future.
Retrofuturism, sure.
Yeah, and so Hot Rod in the 5th movie, he's just straight black with some reddish orange highlights, which makes no sense because Hot Rod or older Hot Rod is primarily red and orange and a little bit of a yellow highlight because he's got like Hot Rod flame pattern or like Hot Rod car flame patterns all over him.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like how Optimus in the Bay movies has flame patterns, which I still find weird.
So that brings us through the modern day. Where do you see Transformers going from here?
Well, with the modern TV shows being the like Siege, Earthrise, Prime, and then being the current show, I feel like they're like the last part of the franchise that somewhat takes itself seriously. Mm-hmm. And then some of the others, they don't quite verge into Teen Titans Go territory.
But they're getting there.
So far, none of the modern shows have veered quite that far. One or two of them definitely feel like they're veering in that direction. But because Transformers has multiple toy lines, like one toy line for very young kids, one toy line for slightly older kids, one line for like the older collectors, and then each of those different toy lines has an accompanying cartoon.
Sure.
And the success of that cartoon isn't really based on how well the show does, but how well the toy line does. That's mostly why the shows tend to only last 3 seasons.
Yeah.
This is why I feel like Transformers as a brand is mostly immune to the woke liberal infection.
Mm-hmm.
Because the toys themselves are the most important thing. They're like the very foundation of the brand. And because they are still being put out with fans and collectors in mind, it kind of negates the whole idea of the brand as a whole being infected. Sure, a comic series or one of the shows may be infected with this, but in the larger scheme of things, that won't last because the toys will keep going. And like fans and collectors will keep buying the toys, and Hasbro will like take that as a keep giving us this for the toys, and also most fans tend not to buy the specific toy lines they don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Because most Transformers do have some amount of sense when it comes to noticing when the show veers into Teen Titans Go territory. And it tends not to be like one of the primary lines, it tends to be one of the lines aimed at very young kids.
Artificer Joni mentions that Prime and Robots in Disguise are connected. There are a few mentions of Prime's humans, and the return of Soundwaves is a sequel to Prime's exit of Soundwave.
Oh, that's in 2015 there was a second show called Robots in Disguise. Mm-hmm. That's why earlier I said 2001 Robots in Disguise, because they both shows are just called Robots in Disguise.
Sure.
So it's easier to distinguish them by naming the year they came out, so 2001, 2015. And the 2015 Robots in Disguise is a direct sequel to Transformers Prime. Although it doesn't take place in the same location. I believe the only recurring character is Optimus himself later in the show, and then Bumblebee from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
because he kind of takes on a hot rod like position where he kind of grows and matures and becomes like leader of the Autobots, similar to Hot Rod's journey back in the 80s. And because that show had in Transformers Prime, Soundwave was trapped in this like shadow dimension because of the space, or because of the ground bridge portals, and then Robots in Disguise brought him back out of that shadow dimension in one of the later seasons.
And then in a tangentially related way, I just saw that Midnight's Edge just uploaded G.I. Joe's Lady J solo series coming to Amazon.
That doesn't surprise me that that's happening.
Yeah, that could be a truly mixed bag.
I mean, I know IDW's G.I. Joe comic has, I don't know if it's been like, if it's definitely been very left-wing, liberal, SJWE.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's been like that all the way through the run, or if it's only like that now, or if it's only been like that temporarily. I'm not 100% sure on like the G.I. Joe and that relation. And I also haven't read much of the IDW Transformers comic, so I don't know if that comic has also been like infected by the, I don't know what you call it, the woke disease, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much. But that's where we are now.
Yep.
But
I mean, at least G.I. Joe has a collector-focused toy line that's been coming out recently.
Yeah, I mean, Hasbro, it's between that and Star Wars, it's what's keeping Hasbro afloat. And I'll tell you what, pretty soon it's just going to be Transformers, because people are pissed about the whole Gina Carano thing, and they're taking it out on Hasbro. Not that it's their fault.
Yeah,
they don't have any control over it. But
and when it comes to the different brands that Hasbro owns, like Transformers, G.I. Joe, My Little Pony, Marvel Legends, Star Wars, they instead of having the company as a whole just preside over all of them, they have the company then kind of divides down into specific divisions for those brands.
Yeah.
So it's like you have Hasbro, and then their Transformers division of Hasbro, the G.I. Joe division of Hasbro, the My Little Pony division, the Star Wars division, Marvel Legends division.
Which does make it a lot easier if something does go belly up. You just close up that shop and you go, okay, we're done. And
just stop producing toys in that specific
everything else
area
continues on without being pulled down by them.
And also because Hasbro is as a company in more recent years was merged with the Japanese company Takara. And actually the one fear that most Transformers collectors had when this happened was that we wouldn't get Japanese exclusive Transformers, but that ended up not being the case. We still do get Japanese exclusive releases of Transformers. And also Takara as a company has remained a Japanese company. They have not been Americanized by this merging.
Yeah.
And I think actually the two companies being one, but also remaining in the separate.
Yeah.
I think that's actually kind of helped Hasbro, because I think the Japanese business sense is could potentially rub off onto Hasbro, and that's possibly why they haven't been completely infected or completely taken over.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yep. And also the Transformers division itself technically is like broken down and separated even more by being like the Transformers division, and then go and then within that division, it Transformers for kids, Transformers for like this age group, Transformers for this group or this age group.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm pretty sure Transformers is the only brand Hasbro has that is like broken down to this level, or is like divided up to this level.
Yeah, very probably.
Because Hasbro has all kinds of merchandise for Transformers. Like you can buy Bumblebee and Optimus Prime bags and like plush toys and bed sheets and pajamas and like probably curtains as well.
If you
There's
produce
like
it, they will buy.
Yeah.
So I feel like I know a great deal more about Transformers than I did when we started this journey. I super appreciate that.
Yep.
And what do we have on the docket going forward?
Well, not sure. I think we have Sound Engraver on Monday.
No, I meant
do you mean like for us?
This channel? Yeah. What are we doing next week?
For what I shall refer to as the two Ronnies. You'll get.
Oh, we could talk about the two Ronnies. That would be a lot of fun.
Actually, we could talk about two Ronnies next week, and then leave a review of season 2 of Ben 10 till the week after that, so that gives you time to watch through the show.
In fact, would you be interested? I don't want to speak for her, but I want to leave the possibility open because I know she'd be interested. I know my wife is a huge Two Ronnies fan. If you want another a voice on the show.
Oh yes, by all means, I don't mind having Nanette on as well.
Okay, I'll ask her if she's up for it. That'd be great. Okay, so next week, tune in. We'll be talking about what now is that a BBC or ITV?
I believe it's BBC.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about an old school BBC comedy sketch show called Two Ronnies.
Yep. And I suppose in a way it will be celebrating the life of Ronnie Barker.
Yeah.
Because he died in 2005.
Yes, he did. I remember Nanette, posted about it on her Facebook, and I'm like, oh, not from the Two Ronnies, but yeah. But that's what we'll do next week. And tonight, obviously, regular time, Aged Boomers channel, and myself will be doing the regular Geeky Geezers. I think you guys all pretty much can guess what the basic topics are going to be for the night. And I don't know if there's a Weeb Watch tonight, but I think I think there's something going. There's some sort of a rewatch or something going with Mr. Matchstick and Wolf 10 Media. That'll be right after us, so we'll make sure to be finished up on time to send you guys over there. Okay.
Yep.
Is that it for tonight?
Yep, that would
morning, whatever.
That would be it at this particular time of the day. Remember to tune in next week for Two Ronnies. It's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me too.